found so often, and maybe you have found the same thing, thinking about, well, I think it's time to move. I'm pretty sure I want to move in 2019. And yet, what do I have to do to get ready to move? What things do I have to think about in advance so that I have, I was going to say no stress, and yet that's probably an illusion. So little stress as I make the move. Today, we're going to talk about the 3 core areas that you want to really think deeply about, ponder about, pray about as you get prepared for potentially a 2019 move.
Hard to say, isn't it? 2019.
I know, I'm still struggling with it, and we're already into near the end of January, and here I am still not sure how to say 2019.
It usually takes me about 3 months where I don't have to think about putting 2019 on a check. And I know for some people the word check is foreign. For the younger generation, they've probably never written a check with all the online banking.
So I'm Yetta Dekker.
I'm Ken Dekker.
And we're part of the Dekker team. And what we love is that we've been able to record over 350 episodes called The Inside Track around everything to do with home ownership, both acquiring it, selling it, and keeping it. So it's not always about making a move. It's sometimes about staying right where you are and loving it. We've got a show coming up that also talks about that. So today, let's look at the 3 categories.
Yeah.
3 categories. Right at the top, I'll give you the categories, and then we'll talk about at least 3 things in each category that I would encourage you to highlight. So if you're note-taking, you've got the ability to be a little bit structured in your note-taking, unless you're like me, and no matter how much structure is offered from the facilitator, I'm still going to be scribbling.
So what she says is if you're going to take notes, write down the 3 things, but leave space in between them so that you can put down 3 to 5 points.
Well, how's not that? If you're Yetta, you scribble. Anyhow, so, or doodle, I guess is what you call it. So the one area that we want to address that is so important is the financial picture. So financially, what are the things that you want to think about first and foremost? And then number 2, we'll talk about what are those physical elements that you want to think about. And then 3, what are the experiential? So the experience, the emotional, that whole mental side of things.
So you don't become a mental case when you move.
No, we don't want to be a mental case when we move. So Ken, in number 1, when we think about the financial.
Well, the first part of the financial is to know your numbers. It's very important that when you're thinking about this move, what's it going to cost me? Especially if you currently own a home, or if you're renting, that affects it as well, because where does my lease go to? How much notice do I need to give my landlord to move and not have it cost me extra? Okay, so that's 1. 2 is, what are the discharge costs, right? Around if I can port my mortgage to the new property, or is it cheaper to pay the penalty for paying it out and get a new rate that's lower on the entire mortgage? That may save you save you money over time.
Right. And so saving money and time is part of this conversation that we're gonna find we weave through this whole conversation.
And then knowing your numbers, it's important to know what the cost of selling the one that you're presently in. So commissions, legal fees, discharge fees for the mortgage, costs to move, physically move. If you're going to rent a truck, or you're going to rent a truck and hire a couple of people, or are you going to, have the truck and a couple cases of beer, or lunch for your friends, or whatever the case may be, or are you going to really pay a company who are professional movers who aren't going to typically damage anything and are going to properly pack and move? Those are considerations in the financial side of things.
Right. And then the other thing you really, really, really want to think about is the upfront cash that you're going to need. So now you've first already handled that you can afford it. You know that there's enough equity in your house. You've taken care of side A, or number 1. And then the next piece is that whole financial. the upfront costs. What do I need in terms of deposits? What do I need for inspections? What do you need from an insurance perspective? What will it take for me to insure this new place, and how long do I keep this one insured? Just all of those, what do we call them? Cash ready type expenses that you can't wait until you get the equity out of your house to use. You need to have access to it up front. So and you've got to have evidence of it sitting in your bank account so that you've got credit worthiness. So a little bit, they're all going to tie together. And yet this number 2 is just saving thousands of dollars. And it could be 10,000 that you require. It could be 15,000. It's whatever you need. Sometimes you can get a loan for a line of credit or something for the deposit, but most of this just needs to be cash, because what you don't want to find is when you get into the new house, you're so stressed financially because you've tapped yourself out too tight.
So you had the deposit. You talked about the deposit.
Right.
That's part of your down payment on the new property. What kind of money do you need? Let's say you're buying a $500,000 home. How much money does someone have to have for that?
It's getting to be more than it used to be, right? So the higher you can make it, the more favorable you actually make your offer in the first place. So I would say a minimum of $5,000, but certainly $15,000 is not a bad idea if you have access to that. It's going to come, you're going to get the money back, so to speak, because it's going to come out of the equity that you have anyway, and yet you need access to that money. Yeah. And you know when you need that money, and most people, if you've moved 2, 3, 4, 5 times, this is no longer a surprise to you, and yet we forget because we don't move that often, right? Most of us don't move that often. Even we only move every 15 or so years, and so the little details can be forgotten. So that deposit that is given to usually the other realtor, the listing company, sits in a trust account, so it's safe money. That deposit actually is cashed basically as soon as you've agreed to purchase the house, even before conditions are met.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because you said it's safe. And I just want our listeners to understand it's safe if it's put in a real estate trust account of a realtor. It's not safe if it's put in the seller's lawyer's deposit account, because they're not regulated by the same rules that realtors are. True. And there's only 3 ways we can take money out of our trust account, and that is we have notification that the sale has been completed. There is a signed mutual release between the buyer and the seller that says give it and who to give it to. Or 3, a court order that says the money must be given to one or the other or whatever proportion. And so that's the only way we can take that money out of a trust account. The lawyer, on the other hand, when they put it into their account, the seller can request the money and the lawyer has to give it to them.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some things that you just want to be really cautious
if they're
about.
Selling by themselves, like whenever we do a sale with one of the other companies where it's a seller selling, but they're not using a real estate company, then we always put the trust money, the deposit money, in our real estate trust account for the buyer.
Yes,
and we don't give it to the seller.
I know
that's why we don't give it to the seller.
Right, and that is, so just let's be safe. Let's just get it into the right hands so that your deposit is safe, because it certainly can be. And then what else do we want to think about financially in relation to preparing for a move in 2019?
Well, this is really interesting because you want to make sure that your credit worthiness going forward stays really tight. And that's right from the time you decide you're going to move, to the time you put an offer in, to the time you get pre-approved, right to the closing date. Don't make any financial decisions that will affect your credit worthiness. Now, that might be things like going to the Brick and buying on a don't pay a cent event.
Right.
That will affect your credit, even though you don't have the product delivered until the day of closing or day after. You're affecting your credit worthiness. Now, the other thing we talked about was that deposit, that down payment. If you've got it in cash, that's great. If you have to borrow it on, say, your line of credit to put the deposit down, now there's more money on your line of credit. It actually affects your credit worthiness.
Yeah, it does.
Even though it was used for part of the down payment.
And then just thinking about even your career, your job stability, it's probably not the time to launch a new business or to
Quit your job.
Definitely don't quit your job. Or even make a career change, though.
Yeah, sometimes they'll look at it if it's a lateral move. In other words, if you were, let's say you were a nurse and you were working at one hospital, and then you got a promotion to work in a different hospital in a different role, maybe in the I don't know, the surgery room or something, then that's considered the same because you're in the same industry.
Right.
But if you switch careers, if you were a nurse and then you decide to become a real estate agent,
don't do that in the middle of a move. Whatever you do, that's the wrong time.
Commission sales is one of the hardest, and owner-owned businesses are some of the hardest careers to get financed for.
And only if you don't already have longevity. If you have longevity in a self-employed or you have longevity in a business, it's not difficult to get financing. It's just difficult to get financing when you're beginning.
I remember the first,
Right.
up to probably 5 years when you were in real estate.
Yeah.
And then I joined you in real estate. For us to get mortgages on the properties we were buying was tougher. And there were certain lenders that were favorable to us and other ones that weren't, based on being self-employed and history and all that.
Right. And yet, as soon as we had a significant amount of proof that we were going to be fine in this career,
We're going to make it.
We're going to more than make it. We'll thrive. Once that was established, it's no more difficult. If sometimes I even find it maybe easier because we're in control of our own and we've got lots of history and records and nobody can fire us, right?
Yeah. The other tricky part is people that are on contract work, and the government gives a lot of contract work in Ottawa. And unless you have stability in your contract work, that's another thing the lender looks at, goes, oh, you've been in a contract for a year, but it's going to end in 1 year. It was a 2-year contract. We don't know if you're going to get a renewal in a year. So it's not as reliable as a full-time permanent.
Right. So the one thing I've encouraged all my clients to do, and I would encourage you to do, if you're going to make a move in 2019, is when you're getting your pre-approval, and get a true pre-approval. Get something that actually they'll still have conditions in it, and yet when you get that pre-approval, make sure that you are honoring all of those conditions that are within it. And if you're thinking of making any sort of shift or change, you want to check with your realtor to say, hey, is this a good idea? They're going to have a really good general sense if they've been in the industry serving clients for a long time. After 30 years, we kind of know what you ought to do and what not ought to do. And then specifically reach out to your mortgage lender and say, I'm thinking about this. Should I do this? Because any of our clients that have done really that ounce of prevention, right? Isn't that how we say it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Yeah.
Isn't that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And let's talk about that for a second, because there is a big difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. And if you're talking with a bank or a mortgage lender, the pre-qualification, they basically just say, okay, how much do you own? How much are your payments? Okay, you'd qualify for this amount of money. Now, if you want a pre-approval, it takes it to the next level. In other words, you're going to be supplying T4s. They're going to pull a credit bureau. You're going to provide letters of employment from your employer. You're going to give all the documents, so they go, oh yeah, you're approved. And there still may be a slight condition. I don't know what kind of condition. Maybe a condition of providing a particular document or whatever, or getting insurance on the house you're buying, or that kind of thing. There'll be conditions.
Always. And they're doable. I mean, the big thing and recognize that when you're removing your finance condition, when you actually now are moving a little bit beyond preparing, and yet this is a piece to be thinking about. When you remove your finance condition, it is still an ongoing ability of the lender to do your credit checks. That's why number 3 that we've talked about, sort of that, is so important, that you just get the input you need so that you don't accidentally make an error that you didn't even know was an error. Mm-hmm. And then number 2, in terms of areas that we wanted to chat about today, is that whole physical side. And I don't mean so much having a physical argument or a physical fight with you or a physical...
Those are always fun.
Yeah, especially with our boxing gloves.
Yes.
Yeah, I have pink boxing gloves and you blue boxing gloves. And that can be kind of fun from a physical perspective, right? And yet when you're preparing for a move, you want to think about, do I have the time? Do I have the time to get ready for the move? Do I have the time to prepare the things that need to be prepared, or because if I don't do them, and I don't have to do them, I mean, we've sometimes chosen to leave our homes in what we might call as-is condition.
So you're talking about the physical preparation time. Right. That's when you say time and physical. So it's the physical time where you're going to move furniture, delete furniture, paint, fix things, that kind of stuff on your existing home.
On your existing home, because if you're going to move this year, because we considered it, right? We kind of said, is this the year that we're going to make a move? Is this the year we're going to simplify? Because that seems to be the catchphrase.
Because somebody wanted an in-ground pool. I'm not sure that's simplifying.
Well, okay, so I'm not getting my pool right now. Anyhow, so we know who wants the pool, right? And in that whole physical side, one of the biggest reasons after doing our post-it exercise and going through the journey, we really decided that what it's going to take from us physically in terms of time and energy to put into the physical structure of the house isn't sensible this year.
Now, that being said, we did spend the last several months having a handyman help us get the home ready. Now, not ready for sale, but we just decided there's too many niggling, is that a good word? Niggling?
Tolerations.
Things that we were tolerating about our home, things that just hadn't quite been completed. We've been in the home for 5 years in April, and there were some things that we had started that weren't fully completed, and it's that little piece of trim here, or that little bit of drywall wasn't fixed there, or even some areas where it's been 5 years and there's been a little bit of wear and tear on the drywall down the staircase, or that kind of thing. So we had that all touched up.
Right. So when we're thinking about physical, that's part of it. That physical element of the home that you're living in.
And now that we decided not to move,
right,
we like it just as much because our house is more pristine.
Right, which is fantastic. And you also want to think about the amount of physical time it's going to take to think about the move. Like that, what am I looking for? What am I going to? Because then now if you're doing renovations at this house, are you going to have to redo them again? So just considering that whole physical side of the structures.
Right. And so guidance. Guidance falls in there in that physical.
Yeah.
Do I know enough myself, or do you know enough yourself to actually know, what do I need to repair? What do I need to do? Who am I going to call in to support me in those areas, right? And hopefully it's the Dekker team.
Well, that would be the ideal.
Yeah, I think so. Personally, I'm a little bit biased.
I'm a little biased too.
But yes. So guidance around not just pricing, but what to do, what doesn't pay to do it, what to finish that's been started, that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, you need some guidance.
Because what we've seen happen, and I would not want this to happen to you, is that a renovation is taken on in a home, thinking I'm going to be moving this year, not me, but I've had folks do this. They decide they're going to make a move this coming year, and so they do some renovations. And then when they call the Dekker team in to have a conversation about the value, and they're certain that the renovation they've done has increased the value, because that's the plan, right? I mean, we don't do most renovations unless they're for our personal enjoyment.
Right.
We don't do most renovations in our home if we're thinking of a move unless we think it's going to increase the value. And sometimes things like changing a kitchen cabinet can actually not increase your home but decrease it, because you went from something that was readily accepted to something that was a little more unusual, a little more to your taste. And although it's trendy and it's beautiful, it may or may not, and in some cases it's actually decrease the value of the home.
Yeah, or you take something that is quite serviceable.
Right.
And you're just tired of it.
Right.
And you change it to a new cabinet, which may cost you $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to redo a kitchen. And maybe it only brings up your value like $5,000.
Right.
So you didn't go negative, but you did actually net $15,000 less.
Right. You did go negative.
But you didn't decrease the value of your home.
Right.
But you didn't increase it as much as you spent.
Right. And so you decreased your equity. Remember, point number one was the whole conversation about, do we have enough equity to be able to make the move? And it doesn't mean you now won't have enough equity, except if you now stressed yourself out to borrow money to do something that actually didn't increase the value of the home equal or greater than the cost of the repair or the improvement, you've hurt yourself. And so we've watched that, unfortunately. And so we don't want that ever to happen to you.
The third category is really, what's the word? I'm thinking ominous, but it's not ominous. It's harder to gauge or measure. Right? And that's the experience. And that's what we really pride ourselves on, giving the client a great experience.
Right. And I don't know so much pride, so I'm going to say
I know,
that's one of them words that, is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me.
Yeah, because we're told not to be prideful.
Right.
And yet if you're prideful of, there's a sense of pride of ownership, that we want to be excellent at what we do, be professional. And so when I use the word pride, it's not that we're boastful. It's more that we desire to do a great job.
Okay, great job. I'm in it for a great job.
There you go.
And making sure that we're giving amazing counsel, which is really what we have focused on. So how's that? Can we kind of find a commonality there? And so the whole experience is there anybody in my family that doesn't agree with the move? Is there somebody
affected by
is going to be affected by the move? And does anybody need support? So there's such an emotional connection to the house that we live in, the space that we live in. I mean, right? Yeah. Even the one we're living in, that's part of the...
And your neighborhood, your kids' friends, are they going to change schools? It all relates to that experience.
Right.
And then when we were moving, now that was...
You'll
correct me, probably 19, 18 years ago. How close am I?
Good.
Okay, I did it.
Yay! Yay!
We did the pros and cons with our children because our son didn't want to move. His memories were like, how old was Ryan then?
14.
He was 14, but his memories were in his room, his decorations, his toys, his clowns. He had a lot of clowns at the time. And so we explained all of that comes with them. The memories come with them. And when we finally did all the pros and cons, he agreed to come. And it was a really good experience because what we did was we engaged him in the decision-making process, even though he's a child, because then he could really live with the discomfort of the move. Because we didn't thrust it upon him. He was part of the decision.
Right. And so that's a vital piece, is make sure the experience is as good as possible for every person that's going to be affected by the move. And that can be tricky. So it takes a lot of forethought to handle the experience part of it, especially the people that are affected that aren't necessarily the prime decision makers.
So another part of the experience is things like pets. How's your pet going to react to this move? Visitors, do you have planned visitors? Is that going to interfere with visitors coming from out of country or out of province or out of another town that we're planning on coming to visit with you for a few weeks or a few days or whatever
Or a
it is?
vacation you want to take.
Right.
Right, because
Yeah.
you don't want the closing now to interfere with that you cancel your vacation plans, because that
Right.
would be sad.
Or
I
maybe,
would cry for
or maybe
you.
you choose that, back to the financial, you choose not to vacation this year or for a couple of years because your money's going into the house, or maybe the house becomes your vacation because you're moving to a lake house or something, or you're buying a cottage, which
Right.
now is your vacation. So there's a lot of
There is.
moving
And so
parts.
the big final piece. Well, and there, you know what? We've only covered this much of the whole prepare for
How much is that?
2019 move.
You did your fingers,
Oh
but
yeah, I
people
did
on the
my
radio
fingers.
can't see that.
Right. Okay, little bit, and
Yeah.
yet an important piece is financially, are you poised? Physically, can you handle what it's going to take? And then emotionally, do you have the ability to take on the stress associated with a move?
Yeah, do you have the emotional capacity, I call it?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
To
emotional
handle the
capacity.
stress. Because there's stress.
There's stress even when you have the DekkerTeam?
Even then. Because
Yeah.
there's so much that happens in our life. Everything is changing in our physical environment, and our house is our home.
Yeah, they say moving is in the top 5
Yeah.
stressors.
So we don't want that.
No.
We want to reduce that as much as possible.
And I think that was one of the reasons we decided not to move this
That's
year,
the
in
main
2019,
reason. Yeah.
was we were thinking, emotional capacity with the changes we have at our brokerage, the supporting our clients. Because what happens is we found when we physically move, right,
Yeah.
the number of clients we can serve actually goes down because we are distracted.
Right. And we don't want to be distracted for you. That would be a really bad choice, just a really bad choice. And so we actually only move every decade and a half or so, primarily for that. That's one of the big reasons.
Because we see a lot of pretty houses that we think, oh, it'd be nice to live here. Oh, it'd be nice to live there.
Exactly.
Oh, it'd be nice to live here.
Right. So for a comprehensive list of what you want to do to prepare for a move in 2019, email us at info@DekkerTeam.com. And if you're thinking, I just have a few questions, then what I would encourage you to do is pick up the phone. Pick up the phone, give us a call at, what's our number? 613-860-4663. So that's 860-HOME, which is because it's all about home. And we will have just a quick conversation before you have to obligate yourself to anything to decide if this is the year and what do you have to do to get prepared.
Because what we want is for you to be thriving in your home and life. We're excited to be your partner in moving forward.
What you wanna do?